Close your eyes just for a moment and imagine this. A long ship, its once proud hull cracked its dragon-headed prow. Splintered lies, half buried beneath a northern sky, heavy and gray, with the weight of centuries. Around it, the cold, unforgiving earth keeps a quiet vigil, guarding a secret that has lain undisturbed for 1,000 years. The bones of warriors rest here, cradled by the soil, their swords and shields beside them, silent testimony to lives lived boldly. But among these relics of battle, something unexpected, something far more human remains, the traces of a final feast. A meal so unusual, so rich with layers of meaning, that modern archaeologists will still puzzle over it. Bones of strange beasts, seeds from far-off lands, fragments of bread blackened by time, and faint, ghostly residues of meat and ale, all laid to rest alongside the dead. What was this last meal meant to say? Why does it blend the humble with the rare, the ordinary with the extraordinary? And how, in the flicker of its long-ago firelight, did it reflect the hopes, the fears, and the final journey of those who shared it? Tonight, I invite you to step softly with me into this true mystery of history, a final Viking meal so remarkable that it makes even our most beloved comfort food seem plain in comparison. Let us explore its secrets together through the hush of ancient nights and perhaps discover what this strange, forgotten banquet still whispers to us across the ages. Picture a desolate northern shore where the sea meets land with a sigh rather than a roar, and where the wind carries with it the salt of ages past. The ground is hard here, frozen much of the year, covered in a patchwork of coarse grass and moss broken only by scattered stones that hint at secrets buried below. It was on such a shore that modern archaeologists, armed not with swords but with trowels and brushes, made a discovery that would perplex and fascinate for generations to come. The excavation began, as many do, with quiet hope and cautious hands. They uncovered the remains of a Viking ship, its great timbers darkened and softened. By time, its ribs curled like the bones of some long-dead beast. A burial ship, a vessel meant not for the sea's waves but for the journey beyond. Around it, the earth yielded up the skeletons of warriors, men who had once sailed, once fought, once feasted beneath these same gray skies. They lay in ordered rest weapons at their sides, as if ready at any moment to rise and answer the call of some distant horn. But it was what lay among them that deepened the mystery. The remnants of a meal, not just any meal, but a feast. Scattered bones of animals, both familiar and strange. Traces of bread charred and ancient. Seeds of plants not native to this windswept place. Fragments of pottery still faintly bearing the stains of ale or mead. And in the soil itself, hints of spices and herbs, some common, some so rare that they must have been brought from lands far beyond the cold edge of the Viking world. Why was this food here? Why, among the weapons and the shields, the treasures and the talismans, had these final diners been laid to rest with the echoes of a banquet? Was it a farewell meal shared by the living before their last battle? Or was it a gift for the dead, a feast to sustain them on the long voyage to Valhalla? The evidence teased at answers, but offered no certainty. The fish bones bore the marks of careful preparation, as if grilled or boiled, in ways meant to honor both taste and tradition. The bread made from rare grains suggested a meal of importance, a break from the everyday loaves of barley and rye. And the presence of imported seeds and herbs whispered of connections of trade routes that spanned seas and continents, of friendships and alliances, or perhaps of conquests that brought the exotic back to these cold shores. Imagine, if you will, the scene before the burial. The ship resting on the shore, surrounded by those who remained. A fire crackling its smoke rising into the chill air. Men and women seated on logs or stones, passing bowls hand to hand, sharing this last meal beneath the same northern sky that now holds only their memory. The scent of roasting meat mingles with the salt of the sea, the tang of wood smoke with the sweetness of mead. There is laughter perhaps, but also the heavy silence of knowing. A knowing that this may be the final time they break bread together. The archaeologists who uncovered this banquet of bones and ash worked slowly, reverently aware that each scrap of food, each shard of pottery, was a word in a story long forgotten. They sifted the soil for clues, piecing together what they could of the menu, of the ritual, of the meaning. But the deeper they looked, the more the mystery seemed to grow. Why these foods? Why this mix of the humble and the rare? And why had time chosen to preserve this particular moment when so many others had crumbled to dust. Some believed it was a warrior band fallen far from home, given what honors could be mustered on a lonely shore. Others saw in the ship and its feast the hand of ceremony, a sacrifice, a ritual meant to bridge the worlds of the living and the dead. And still others wondered if this meal was meant as a map, a guide laid out in food and drink to show the departed the way to the halls of the gods. As we begin our exploration of this lost banquet, let your mind linger on that cold, silent shore, the broken ship, the bones of men and beasts, the scattered remains of bread and fish, of herbs and ale. And let the questions rise gentle and unhurried. What did this meal mean to those who prepared it? What did it mean to those who ate it? And what might it still mean to us as we seek to understand their world, their hopes, their fears, their final farewell? When you are ready, we will look more closely at what was served on that ancient table and what those choices might tell us about the people who, in the face of the longest night, chose to meet it not with fear, but with a feast. Let us draw a little closer, now closer to that ancient table, if you can call it that. There is no polished wood here, no silver cutlery, no fine china. Instead, imagine simple boards or stones arranged near the fire. Rough bowls and wooden platters passed hand to hand, each bearing its share of the final feast. And upon these humble dishes lay foods that even in death spoke of who these Vikings were, where they had been, what they believed, what they hoped for as they crossed into the unknown. The first thing to catch the archaeologist's eye was the fish. Not just any fish, but deep-sea varieties that spoke of daring voyages and skilled hands. Their bones, delicate and brittle with age, bore the subtle marks of careful preparation, filleted with precision, likely grilled or gently boiled perhaps over stones heated in the fire's heart. This was no hasty meal of survival. It was a dish chosen, prepared with intention, perhaps even with reverence. Next came the meat fragments of bone that told of creatures both familiar and rare. Some belonged to animals of the hunt deer or wild boar, symbols of the wilderness of strength drawn from the land. But mingled among them were more unusual finds, bones that could have belonged to bears, to seals, perhaps even to horses. Such animals were not everyday fare. Their presence hinted at ritual, at sacrifice, at a meal meant to bridge the human and the divine. There was bread too, or what remained of it. Dark, dense loaves made from grains that in part were common barley and rye, the sturdy grains of the north. But woven into the dough were seeds of plants that did not belong to these shores, that had come from distant lands, carried perhaps in the hold of a ship or in the pack of a trader who had crossed many seas. The bread was coarse by modern standards, but it was rich with meaning, a blending of the everyday and the extraordinary. And then there were the traces, more fleeting, the ghosts of flavors that time could not completely erase. A dusting of ash that hinted at herbs thrown into the fire or scattered over the food at the last moment. Pollen grains from plants that might have been used to flavor broth or brew. Tiny blackened seeds from spices known to travel the ancient trade routes, coriander perhaps, or mustard, or even remnants of garlic or onion brought from far to the south. What of drink? The pottery shards, dark with the stain of age, yielded their secrets slowly. Residues suggested ale, thick and hearty, brewed from barley rich with the earthiness of the grain, and mead sweet and golden, its honeyed scent long since fled, but its memory lingering in the traces left behind. These were drinks for celebration, for farewell, for fortitude. It is easy in our modern world of endless choice and easy abundance to overlook the significance of these foods. We reach for pizza, for chocolate, for the familiar comfort of soup or tea when we seek solace. But this meal, this final Viking feast, was crafted with care and purpose. Each element spoke not just to hunger, but to identity. The fish spoke of the sea's gifts, the meat of the land's bounty, the bread of home, and the ties that bound these men to their people. The spices, rare and precious, hinted at a world beyond the horizon, at the journeys taken, the connections made. The ale and mead carried with them the warmth of shared toasts, of stories told in the fire's glow of bonds that even death could not sever. And so the question lingers, why this mix of the humble and the rare, the ordinary and the extraordinary? Was it meant to honor the dead, to send them forth well-provisioned into the afterlife? Or was it a statement to the gods, an offering meant to secure safe passage to earn favor, to ensure that these souls would find their place in Valhalla or in the halls of their ancestors? Or was it simply the best that could be offered, a final act of love and loyalty by those who remained? As you rest tonight, let your mind linger on that strange and poignant table. See the fish laid out with care, the dark bread sliced with steady hands, the steam rising from bowls of broth, seasoned with herbs gathered in summer's warmth. Picture the mead golden in the firelight, passed from hand to hand as voices murmured blessings or farewells. And ask yourself, what story does a meal tell when it is the last one shared? What do we choose to offer, to prepare, to share when the night is long and the journey ahead is unknown? When you are ready, we will explore what this feast may have meant, not just for the bodies it nourished, but for the spirits it was meant to guide, and for the loved ones who prepared it with such quiet, enduring care. Let your mind drift softly back to that quiet shore. The ship, its great frame, resting in a hollow of sand and stone, is now filled not with warriors ready for battle, but with those who have already faced their final fight. Around them, the relics of their lives, their swords, their shields, the tools of their trade, and the remnants of that curious final meal. But for whom was this feast truly prepared? Was it meant to nourish the living, those left behind? Or was it crafted as a gift for the dead, a bridge between this world and the next? To understand, we must step into the world of Viking belief, a world where the line between the living and the dead was not as sharp as we might think today. The Vikings saw death not as an end, but as a journey, a crossing over to other halls, other shores where the brave might feast forever beneath the roof of Valhalla, or where the quiet-hearted might find rest in the embrace of their ancestors. And just as a warrior would not set out on a voyage without supplies, neither would the soul set forth on that final crossing empty-handed. So the feast. Picture it, the living gathered around the ship, the cold air filled with the scent of smoke and roasting meat, the sea a silver mirror beneath the moon, the crackle of fire, the murmur of voices speaking blessings, sharing memories, offering their strength to those who would soon leave this world behind. The food was prepared not in haste, but with care, with reverence. Each piece of bread broken, each cup of mead raised was an act of farewell, of love, of hope. But there is another layer still. Some scholars believe these meals were not only for the dead, they were also for the living, those who would stay behind to remember, to carry on, to face the long nights and empty spaces left by those who had gone. The feast gave comfort, gave closure, gave a moment of warmth in the cold shadow of loss. It was a way to honor not only the journey of the departed, but the endurance of those who remained. Consider the shared act of eating. The living might have eaten from the same dishes that held offerings for the dead, might have sipped from the same horn of mead, as if to say, "We are with you even now. Our strength is yours. Our breath, our heartbeat goes with you into the dark." And in return, the food left upon the ship, or buried beneath the keel, became part of the great offering, the gifts that would accompany the soul on its journey. The dual nature of this meal, at once a farewell and a bond, makes it all the more poignant. It was not a meal of indulgence, though the best and rarest foods were offered. It was not a feast of joy, though laughter may have mingled with tears. It was a ritual, a sacred act, a way to weave together the threads of past and future life, and death mortal and divine. And perhaps as we sit here now, imagining that ancient scene, we can see ourselves in it too. We who seek comfort in food when our hearts are heavy. We who gather at tables to mark endings, to share memories, to honor those we have loved and lost. The Vikings, in their way, were not so different. Their final meal was their way of saying, "You are not forgotten. You do not go alone." Let this image stay with you as you rest tonight, the ship resting in the quiet cove, the firelight flickering on faces lined with grief and strength, the air fragrant with wood smoke and roasted meat, the sound of waves soft against the shore. A feast for the living, a gift for the dead, a final meal that nourished not just the body, but the soul. And when you are ready, we will turn to the hearth, to the cooking fires, and gently explore how such a meal was prepared, how in the heart of winter and sorrow, hands worked with care and purpose to create a banquet worthy of memory and mystery. Now let us step closer to the hearth, to the heart of that last gathering. Outside, the air is sharp, each breath a pale cloud that drifts and vanishes. The sea lies quiet beneath its skin of ice, and the wind hums low through the rigging of the silent ships. But near the fire, life stirs. Flames crackle and pop, sending up sparks that dance for a moment against the endless northern night. Here in this small circle of warmth and light, the final feast takes shape patiently, reverently, as if every action carries within it a prayer. The Vikings were no strangers to cooking in the cold. Their lives depended on it winter after winter. And so with practiced hands they began. Stones large and smooth were placed into the heart of the fire, where they glowed red-hot, soaking in the heat. These stones would be used to boil water or broth in sturdy pots of iron or soapstone, or to grill cuts of fish and meat with a sizzle that rose above the hush of the night. Imagine it the scent of wood smoke thick in the air, mingling with the rich aroma of fat dripping onto coals. The soft hiss as herbs, perhaps wild thyme or angelica, are scattered over the food, their fragrance a fleeting offering to both the living and the gods. A woman stirs a pot with slow, steady motions, watching as the broth darkens as the steam rises to warm her face. A man, his breath visible in the cold, turns a spit by hand, ensuring the meat cooks evenly basted now and then, with what little fat could be spared so that it glistens in the firelight. The bread was baked on flat stones set near the edge of the fire, the dough shaped by hands chapped from cold and work. The loaves rose slowly, their crusts darkening, their scent filling the air with the promise of nourishment. And in smaller pots, mead was gently warmed so that when it was passed hand to hand, it carried not only the sweetness of honey, but the comfort of heat against cold lips. It was slow work, this final cooking. There was no rush, no clatter of pots or sharp commands. Each movement was deliberate, each choice of ingredient thoughtful. For this was no ordinary meal. The care taken in its making was as much a part of the offering as the food itself. The act of preparation was a way of honoring those who would not eat again, of saying with every slice, every stir, you mattered. You will be remembered, and all around the night bore witness. The stars sharp and clear above the sea, silent at the edge of hearing the earth itself, holding still as if to listen. The fire's glow painted faces with gold and shadow, made the eyes of the living shine with reflection and resolve. Here in this quiet labor was both farewell and strength. Here was the weaving of memory into bread and broth, into roast and ale. Think for a moment of how we prepare our comfort foods today. A button pressed, a timer set, a packet opened. The warmth comes fast, but often the soul of the meal is missing. The Vikings had no such shortcuts. Their comfort, their farewell, came not only from the food, but from the making of it. From the time spent tending the fire, from the scent of wood and smoke in their hair and clothes, from the shared work that bound the mourners together. And perhaps that is part of the mystery that lingers still around this final feast. Not just what they ate, but how they made it. How in the face of loss they turned to the simple, sacred act of feeding one another, of feeding the memory of those they loved. How they used the tools they had, the fire, the stone, the pot, the blade, and with them created something lasting, something that could speak across the centuries to those of us who pause to listen. As you rest tonight, let this image stay with you, the glow of the hearth, the slow dance of hands over bread and broth, the quiet voices sharing tasks and memories. Let it remind you that even in the coldest night, even in the hardest moment, there is warmth to be made. There is comfort in the work of care. And when you are ready, we will sit beside that final table and look closer at what this meal meant, not just in flavor or in hunger, but in symbol and message, in the quiet words it spoke to the gods and to the future. Let us sit quietly now beside that final Viking table. Though it was not a table as we know it, perhaps it was the deck of the burial ship itself, perhaps stones arranged near the hearth, perhaps the cold earth warmed by firelight in the breath of those gathered. What matters is not the shape of the table, but what it bore, not just food for the body, but offerings for the soul, for the gods, for the long journey ahead. Every piece of that meal, every choice of ingredient spoke in the silent language of belief. The fish drawn from deep and treacherous waters spoke of wisdom, of courage, of the gifts of the sea that gave life to those who dared its paths. To the Vikings, the sea was both a giver and a taker. Offering its creatures at a final feast was a way of acknowledging that bond, of asking the sea's favor for one last crossing, this time to the shores beyond death. The meat, too, was heavy with meaning. Bear, seal, or horse each carried its own weight and symbol. Bear meat, if it was truly part of this feast, spoke of strength of the fierce heart, that faces both the storm and the foe without fear. The seal creature of two worlds, sea and land, might have symbolized the soul's journey between realms, a guide from the known into the mystery. The horse companion of battle and voyage alike was often seen as a bridge between life and death, its sacrifice a gift to the gods, a promise that the rider's courage would not end at the grave. And what of the bread, dark and dense, laced with seeds from distant lands? In every culture, bread is more than food. It is home, it is hearth, it is the work of hands that sow and reap that grind and knead that bake and break. To lay bread upon the burial ship was to send with the dead a piece of their home, a symbol of community, of belonging, of the life they had built and now left behind. The rare seeds hinted at journeys made at connections forged across oceans, at a world larger than the narrow shores of a single village. Even the herbs and spices, the humble dustings of flavor, carried meaning. To burn thyme or scatter angelica was to cleanse, to protect, to invite the favor of unseen forces. To add the sweetness of honey to mead was to honor Freya, goddess of love, of fertility, of battle's chosen dead. Each choice was deliberate, a word in a prayer, too deep for speech. The drinks shared that night, dark ale, golden mead, were no casual refreshment. They were toasts, blessings, oaths. The mead in particular linked the living to the divine, its honeyed warmth recalling the sacred mead of poetry, said to grant wisdom and eloquence. To drink it together at the last was to share strength, to bind hearts, to ask the gods for favor on the road ahead. Imagine for a moment a man lifting his horn in the firelight, his face lined by wind and war, and now by sorrow. His voice low, steady as he names the fallen, as he calls on Odin or Thor or Freya to receive them. The mead is poured, a little spilled on the earth, an offering to the soil that will cradle the dead. The rest is shared, the taste bittersweet on tongues that know both loss and love. This was not a meal for pleasure. It was not a feast to fill the belly. It was a ritual, a message, a bridge between worlds. In every crumb of bread, in every bone left bare, in every drop of mead, was written the story of the life that had been lived, the hopes for the life beyond. The food was chosen not for richness or rarity alone, but for what it said about the dead, about the living, about the gods, about the unbroken circle of existence. Perhaps that is why even now the meal humbles us. We think of comfort food today as what soothes, what fills, what pleases the senses in moments of need. But this meal, the final Viking feast, was comfort of another kind. The comfort of knowing that one had done all that could be done. The comfort of sending a loved one forth with honor. The comfort of standing together at the edge of the unknown with the fire warm at your back and the sea quiet before you. As you rest tonight, let your thoughts linger on that ancient plate, on that simple sacred meal. Let it remind you that food can be more than nourishment, that it can be memory, message, blessing. Let it remind you that even the smallest act done with care and purpose can reach beyond this world and touch the next. And when you are ready, we will reflect on what this farewell feast still teaches us today, about comfort, about meaning, about the way we feed both body and spirit in our own moments of darkness. Tonight, as we linger near the fading glow of that ancient Viking hearth, it is natural to wonder, what does such a feast so distant from our own time have to say to us now? What can we, with our kitchens of convenience, our shelves lined with spices from every corner of the world, our endless choices of food and drink, learn from a meal prepared on a cold shore, beneath a gray sky for those who would not eat again? Perhaps it begins with this, that comfort. True comfort is not found in richness or variety, in sweetness or spice alone. It is found in meaning, in the care taken, in the hands that prepare, and the hearts that share. The final Viking meal was not meant to delight the palate or fill the stomach. It was meant to bind together the living and the dead, to turn food into memory, into prayer, into promise. Think of our modern comfort, foods the ones we reach for on cold nights or weary days. A bowl of soup, steaming and simple. A slice of warm bread butter melting into its crust. A favorite, sweet, soft, with sugar and nostalgia. We seek in these foods more than taste. We seek the feeling of being cared for, of being known, of being safe. The Vikings too sought comfort, but their comfort lay in ritual, in togetherness, in the certainty that even in loss, they could offer something lasting, something that spoke of love and honor. Their feast teaches us that food can be an act of remembrance, that when we prepare a meal, even the simplest one with thought and purpose, we do more than feed the body. We feed the soul. We create a moment that lingers, that connects, that says, without words, I am with you. I honor you. I carry your story forward. Consider the bread they baked, dense and dark, not soft like modern loaves, but rich with the labor of hands that sowed harvested ground, kneaded baked. Or the fish chosen and prepared with care, not because it was the easiest meal, but because it was the right one, the one that spoke to the sea, to the gods, to the journey ahead. Or the mead warmed by the hearth's glow, passed from hand to hand in quiet communion. What if we thought of our own meals in this way? What if instead of reaching for the fastest, the easiest, the most indulgent food, we pause just for a moment to ask, what am I really seeking? Is it sweetness or is it solace? Is it fullness or is it the memory of gentler times, of shared tables, of voices once familiar? The final Viking feast reminds us that food is more than fuel. It is language. It is legacy. It is a way of saying what words sometimes cannot. The choice of what to serve, of how to serve it, of with whom to share it, becomes part of the story we tell about ourselves, about those we love, about what matters when the night is long and the future uncertain. Imagine the comfort found in that final meal, not in the richness of the food, but in the richness of its meaning. The comfort of knowing that nothing had been spared, that every effort had been made, that the departed were sent forth, not with haste, but with honor. The comfort of shared work, of shared sorrow, of shared remembrance, as the fire crackled and the cold sea whispered beyond the shore. In our own lives, in our own moments of loss or longing, perhaps we can draw upon that quiet wisdom. We can remember that a simple meal prepared with care, shared with presence, can be as comforting as any feast. That to feed one another is to care, to honor, to keep the bonds between us strong, even in the face of change or parting. And so, as you rest tonight, let this thought warm you that the Vikings in their final feast left us a lesson in comfort far deeper than the foods we choose. They left us a reminder that what matters most is not what fills the plate, but what fills the heart. When you are ready, we will return one last time to that silent ship, to the empty plates and the quiet sea, and reflect on what this final bite, this ancient sacred meal, teaches us about endings and about the light that lingers, even as the fire fades. And so we come to the quiet after the feast. The ship rests still upon the cold earth, its great curved ribs arching toward a sky that has watched over many such endings. The fires that cooked the final meal have burned low, leaving only faint trails of smoke that drift into the northern night. The bowls and platters emptied of bread and broth lie where they were set. The horns that once brimmed with mead now stand silent. The voices that shared the meal, that spoke the names of the fallen, that whispered prayers to the gods, have grown still. This is the moment of the last bite, not only the final morsel of food taken, but the final act of care, of ritual, of connection. And it is here that the deepest lesson of that ancient Viking meal lingers, that endings are not simply stops. They are bridges. They are promises. They are the threads that tie what has been to what will come. The Vikings knew this in their bones. They faced endings often at sea, in battle, in the turning of harsh seasons. And when the greatest ending of all came, when a life was done, they met it with fire, with song, with food, prepared not in haste but in reverence. The final meal was not about sating hunger. It was about honoring the journey, about saying you mattered. You go forth not alone, but with our strength, our memory, our love. And perhaps, too, it was about comforting those left behind, about giving shape to grief so that it could be shared, about turning sorrow into action, the building of the pyre, the baking of the bread, the stirring of the pot, the raising of the cup. In these simple, sacred acts, loss was woven into the fabric of life, made bearable, made beautiful in its own quiet way. Imagine now the shore at dawn, the ship ready for its final voyage, the sea calm waiting, the last of the embers glowing faintly in the ash. The people stand together, the meal behind them, the farewell spoken. There is sadness, yes, but also peace. The knowledge that all that could be done had been done, that the dead were sent forth with honor, with the gifts of land and sea of fire and heart. What do we across 1,000 years take from this moment, that in our own endings, be they small or great, expected or sudden, we too can choose meaning. We can choose to honor, to remember, to connect. We can see in the last bite not loss alone, but love carried forward. In our modern world, it is easy to forget this. Endings come fast. Meals are hurried. Farewells are brief. But the Vikings remind us to pause, to light the fire, to bake the bread, to sit with one another even in sorrow and make of that moment something lasting. As you rest tonight, let this image stay with you. The ship upon the shore, the plates empty, but the hearts full. The last bite taken not in haste, but in gratitude. The fire's warmth lingering even as the night deepens. Let it remind you that every ending holds within it a beginning, that the care we take, the love we show, the rituals we keep, are what guide us across the dark waters toward whatever dawn may come. And so as our journey through this ancient mystery draws to a close, may you carry with you the quiet strength of that final meal, the wisdom of those who face the longest night with bread, with mead, with memory. And may you find in your own times of ending the same gentle courage, the same enduring light. If this story has brought you reflection or comfort, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe so that together we may continue to explore the soft echoes of history's forgotten moments. And so at last we return in our thoughts to that silent northern shore. The burial ship, heavy with its cargo of courage and farewell, rests beneath the wide gray sky. The sea beyond lies quiet as if holding its breath. The final meal, so carefully prepared and shared, has faded into memory, but its meaning lingers like the last warmth of a fire, like the faint scent of smoke upon the wind. What does it leave us, this ancient banquet of bread and fish of mead and meat of hands working together in the cold? It leaves us a reminder that even in parting there is love, that in endings there is a kind of light, that food humble, simple, made with care can speak across centuries saying, "You were not forgotten. You were sent forth with honor." And perhaps, too, it offers us a gentle lesson for our own lives, that in our moments of loss, of change, of saying goodbye, we might choose to pause, to light our own small fire, to share a meal, to remember to give thanks. The Vikings faced their long nights with courage shaped by community, by ritual, by the knowledge that no one sails into the unknown alone. Tonight, as you rest, let the image of that final feast stay with you. The quiet shore, the empty plates, the fire's last glow, the ship ready for its journey. Let it remind you that comfort is not in what fills the belly, but in what fills the heart. That endings like the last bite of a meal can be sweet with memory, strong with meaning. If this tale has brought you peace or reflection, I invite you to stay with us for more soft journeys through the forgotten corners of history. Please like, share, and subscribe so that together we can keep these quiet stories alive.